Hello and welcome back. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to fill in a bald spot in an image on a person's head in Photoshop without using the clone stamp tool. I actually got the idea for this tutorial from a tutorial that I saw about adding facial hair to a person in Photoshop. So I'll go ahead and link to that video in the description of this one. And I'll go ahead and just get started. The first thing that I'm going to do is, I have my picture here opened in Photoshop. I'm just going to zoom in. So I'll press the Z on the keyboard, or you can select the magnifying glass over here in your tool palette. So I'll go ahead and zoom in on the area that I want to get started in, and I'll go ahead and get started in this area. Now the difference between this video and the one that I was watching, or the biggest difference I should say, is that I'm going to need to make more brushes, and I'm going to need to do a lot more blending and coloring with this technique. So please bear with me. It might take a little bit of, it might be a little bit of a longer tutorial. So the first thing that I'm going to do is start in this area. I'm going to make a new layer. Then the next thing that I want to do is kind of set the tone for my whole bald spot, I guess I'll just say. So I'm going to grab my brush. I'm going to just grab kind of a round brush and make it a pretty large size and leave the hardness at 0. So what I did is I grabbed the drop down up here after I selected my brush in the tool palette, set the hardness to 0, and set the size to pretty large. Okay, and we just wanted a round brush. I'll click in here and I'll hit Control Z to remove that. I actually like the color that I have selected, but I'll tell you the way that I did that is I hit the I on the keyboard, or you can select the eyedropper in your tool palette, and I just clicked some of the hair around the area until I found one that I liked. So I'll hit the B on the keyboard to get my brush back, and I'm going to go ahead and actually zoom out a little bit and just color in pretty much the entire top of this guy's head. And I'll explain to you why I'm doing that is because I'm going to, later on in this video, edit the color of this and some of the blending modes. And I might want more areas with this same color, and I might lose this color from my tool palette later. So I'm just going to color in more area that I think I'm going to need. And I'm just going to kind of mask it back out. That way that I can always have this color. So what I'm going to do is I'll rename this layer base color, or just base. And then I will add a layer mask to it by hitting the layer mask button down here. And like I said, I'm just going to erase some of this back away until I get back to my bald spot area. So I can hit the E on the keyboard to get my eraser, or you can click it in the tool palette, go up to the top, make the hardness 0, make the size pretty big, and just go ahead and start erasing back away that color. Once again, I'm just kind of saving that color for the entire head to use in case I want to fill in some of these areas, like maybe the widow's peak later or something. So you can see that I went all the way around the bald spot and actually removed a little bit more than I probably should have. So I can hit the B on my keyboard to get my brush back, or once again, brush in the tool palette and just kind of click around the area again until I get more of the area that I want. And that's going to be fine for now. And what I'll do is try to get this kind of close to where I think it's going to be towards the end. And so what I'll do is I'll play around with some of these blending modes, sorry, and see which one I like the best. And I've already done this, so I'll let you know that there's a couple that are pretty good. Soft light's okay, but for this particular one, I usually like to do the multiply. It's a little bit dark, so what I'll do is I'll do a multiply on there, and then I'll take the opacity of the entire layer down just a little bit to kind of blend back in. But you do want it fairly dark to set that base, because you're going to inevitably be able to see through some of these hairs that we draw back in. Okay, so that's pretty good. I'm up to 93% opacity with a multiply on that layer with some very soft edges. I'll go ahead and hit the Z on the keyboard to grab my magnifying glass and zoom back in. And like I was saying, I'm going to start in this area, and I'll start now. I'll hit the B on my keyboard to get my brush back, go up to the top, set the size down to 1 pixel, make the hardness 100%, and I'm going to add a new layer by clicking the new layer button on the right. We can call that hair, or anything you want. And what we'll do is we'll just draw in our first piece of hair that we want. And I'll just draw just like that. The next thing that we'll do, if we like the way that that looks, is we'll make another new layer. We'll drag that directly below the hair layer that we just made, and we're going to put a white box behind that. The reason being is, in order to knock out the areas behind the hair, when we make a brush, there just needs to be a white box back behind it. As you can see, the color that I had selected in my foreground was brown, so I'm going to go ahead and just double click on that new shape layer and select all F's to make it white. And you can see there's the hair I drew. Not very pretty, so I can zoom in a little bit, grab my eraser tool and pretty that hair up a little bit, kind of soften the edges. If you hit your brackets to the bracket tool keys to the right or to the left, you can change the size of any brush or eraser. So I'll get rid of this weird little end point here. You can see I still have a pretty soft brush, and I actually kind of like that because I'm just going to kind of fade the top end of the hair out. The bottom end doesn't need to be faded or faded as much. So kind of like the way that that's looking, so I'll go forward with that. The next thing that I want to do is hit my marquee tool. So M on the keyboard will grab your marquee tool, or the little dotted ant line thing in your tool palette is the marquee tool, and make a selection around your hair. And once you have your selection, it doesn't need to be around the entire white box, but just try to get it where you want it, and go up to Edit and down to Define Brush Preset. And call this hair, and click OK, and you just made a brush. So the next thing you can do is get rid of this rectangle layer. I'm just going to hide it because we might use it again, and press Command D to get rid of your marquee tool, and you can start using your brush. You can zoom out a little bit if you want. I'm actually going to just zoom out a tiny bit, and I can leave this one piece of hair here, or get rid of it, whatever you want to do, because we're going to go ahead and draw in a lot more. So I'll hit the B on my keyboard to get this brush. You can see it looks kind of like a hair. If I click and drag, it makes a whole lot of weird hair looking brushes, but that's not looking like a hair really yet. So I'm going to hit Command Z and show you how to make it look more like hair. Go back up to your brush palette in the top left here and click on the little folder that is the brush panel, and open it. Click on Shape Dynamics at the top and change some of these settings. Excuse me. Size jitter. We want to drag that slider to the right. And we actually want quite a bit of a size jitter on there so that we can have some different looking pieces of hair. And I can show you, if I click and drag, that we have different sizes of hair now, but they're still all in one line. So what we can do is change the angle a little bit. With hair, most of the hairs are kind of going in the same direction, so we don't want to change this too much. So I'm just only going to do 4 or 5% on this. The next thing that we want to do, as you can see, this is what we look like now, is I'm going to go ahead and just change, and I'll press Command Z again to get rid of that. We're going to go click on Scattering up here and select it. And I'm just going to scatter these a little bit so I don't have to drag quite so much. Maybe 100% or so would be fine. And we can change the count to go up a little bit more too. Okay, and then that's pretty good. The next thing we can do is just start using our brush to paint in some hair. And what you want to do is you want to hit I on the keyboard and grab different colors around the area, and then B to get your brush back, and just kind of try to start filling in different areas with hair. Hit I, grab a selection, hit B, paint in some hair. I, selection, B, hair. Okay, I'll zoom out, and you can see that we've already started to fill in this area quite a bit. If you don't like the way some of this is looking, you can definitely go back in and soften things up by adding a layer mask. Hit the E on your keyboard, and take just that soft eraser, and just erase a little bit of the areas that you don't like. Okay? So like if you start to get out of the area where your hair is pointing in the same direction or something, go ahead and erase those areas because you're going to want to make a new brush for that. And that's what I'm going to do right now. And actually, if you want to kind of save yourself some time, here's a trick that I'm going to show you. Once you paint in some hair, which we have right here, you can take that layer and just kind of copy it and move it slightly. And that'll kind of fill in a lot of your hair. You can even change the angle of the entire thing just slightly so that it doesn't look exactly the same. And what I did there is I hit Command T on the keyboard to get up a box and drag one of my handles around to change the angle. Okay, so you can do that multiple times if you want to kind of fill in an area a little bit faster. So I'll do it one more time even. Command J to copy that whole layer, drag it slightly, Command T, change the angle a little bit, and double click to just make it get selected there. Okay, so you can see we've already filled that in, and I can already tell you right now that we're going to need that base layer a little bit darker. So I'm going to go ahead and just do that now. Bring the opacity back up to around probably 100% with that multiply on it. And that looks pretty good actually. Okay, and what we'll do is just kind of continue to do that until this is filled in. So we can grab another area of hair, maybe down here, and we'll make a new brush. So I'm grabbing my 1 pixel brush tool with hardness up at 100%. I'll select my rectangle because we're going to use it again, and bring it down over here. Grab my brush tool that we just made 1 pixel, 100%, and make a new layer up above that rectangle. Call it hair 2 or something. And I'm going to go ahead and just, while I'm thinking about it, grab all these hair pieces that I made just a little bit ago, and I'm just going to group them into a folder so that I know that I'm done working with them. And I'll just call it hair section 1. I'm not coming up with great names for these, I know, but it's because I don't want to spend time on this video coming up with names of hair sections. Okay, next thing I want to do is kind of draw another piece of hair that I can fill in this area with. So I'll just do it something like that. And I can drag that into my white box area and grab the marquee tool. Oh, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Oops. Let's grab an eraser tool, hit the left bracket to shrink it a little bit, and soften up the tip a little bit to make it look more like hair. You can do that really with both sides a little bit, but you want the piece that you think is going to be like the end to be a little bit softer. Okay. Now hit M on my keyboard, grab the marquee tool, and go around the hair, go up to Edit, and define brush preset. And we'll call this hair 2. Okay, now I can get rid of my rectangle, Command D to get rid of my marquee. We're on this hair layer 2. I can move that around. If you want to see what you're working with, go ahead and just remove your base for a couple seconds and throw that somewhere that you want it. Hit B on your keyboard. Anytime you make a new brush, the new brush is going to be selected automatically, but if you need to go back to your other one, you can simply go to your brushes drop down, and it should be right there available for you to use. It should be one of the ones right next to it. Okay, so you can see I have this new brush made. Looks pretty good. I'm going to do some of the same things with this that I did to the other one. So I'll grab my brush palette, Shape dynamics, do some size jitter stuff to it, do a minimum diameter. I'm going to leave that at 0. I'm going to do angle jitter. This can be, in this area, it seems to be a little bit worse, so I can go maybe a little higher. And then do some scattering. And click back to my picture and just start painting in some stuff here. And just hit I, grab a color, B, paint in the hair. I, color, B, paint in the hair. I, color, B, for the brush, paint in the hair. All right, we'll come up a little higher on this area. Since I apparently didn't come down very far with the other hair. We can zoom out a little bit. And grab a color, paint in some hair. I, grab a color, B, paint in some hair. You can see that it's pretty dark in some areas, so I'm trying to get some darker hair to blend in. And the blending is really what we're trying to do. Okay, so like I said, I didn't come down very far with this hair. I think I want to come down a little farther. So what I can do is, like I said before, I can make a copy if I want and just drag some of it down. So Command J to make a copy and drag it down. Command T to change the angle a little bit so that we don't look exactly the same. And just kind of start to fill in some different areas like that. And I'll do that again. Command J, copy that whole area. Just move it where you want it. If you start to, you can move it even like this if you want. Control T, change the angle to match the area that you're dragging it into. And then if you end up getting hair outside of the head like this, you can simply just add a mask, hit E on your keyboard, and brush some of that out with the eraser. Looks like I have my opacity down on my eraser, so I'm going to bump that up to 100 to paint this out. And that's starting to look pretty good. Use that eraser to blend in some of your hair pieces. Okay, so what I'll do is I can copy this layer down here, like I was doing with some of these layers, and just start filling in more and more of the area. Oops. Changing the angle a little bit. Okay, so we're starting to get somewhere. If I put my base layer down, you can see that some of these colors are off. So what you would want to do is kind of probably try to erase some of those. So I'll get rid of this layer and try to erase some of those colors that are off from this hair layer. So I created another mask, hit E, grab a soft brush, and just kind of dab those out. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Once again, I can select this layer, hit J, and move it, and that's just going to once again fill in a little bit more of the area. And then I can switch the angle by hitting Command T and just move it a little bit to make it blend a little bit more. Okay, and that's looking pretty good. I probably want to fill in this area a little bit more, so I'm going to make one more area. And what I'll do, I think just to try to save time, I'm going to try to use some of this hair I used before, and I hope that it works out. So what I'll do is I'll make another copy of this area. So I'll press Command J, and I'll move that over to kind of where I want it. And I'm just going to try to change the angle of this hair to the same angle of this area. So what I'll do is I'll move it to the area, hit Control T, and just kind of drag this around until it is pointing in the right direction. Something kind of like that. And then what I'm going to do is just drop it there. And then I'll hit E on the keyboard to grab my eraser, because you can see that it kind of overlaps in places that I don't want it. Let's call this left side while I have it selected. And I'll add a mask to that group. I will hit the E on the keyboard to get my eraser, and it's still a very soft eraser, pretty large size, and I'm just going to blot out some of these areas that are bugging me. Okay, and that's starting to look pretty good. I think I'm going to, at this point, pretty much be done. I'm going. It's looking pretty good for the purposes of this video. Though one last thing that you can kind of do is just play with the opacities and make sure that it kind of looks the same as the rest of the hair. And I should actually go back in and make some darker spots too. So I can do that in my base layer, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'll go ahead and just real quick before this video is over, add some darker spots so that it looks like the actual hair. So I'll hit I on the keyboard to grab my eyedropper, hit B to grab my brush, and this time I want a soft brush that's kind of big, and I'm going to take the opacity down on the brush a little bit to 50%. I'm just going to kind of blot in some darker spots and try to blend in a little bit, because I noticed when I zoomed out that we still had a bald spot looking kind of thing. So I'm just going to kind of blot in a few areas to try to make this look a little bit more realistic. And if you get out of the area that you want to be in, you can just erase it back. And if it's too strict of or harsh of an eraser, you just take the opacity down up here, make the size a little bigger, and just hit a little bit bigger of an area with your very soft eraser. And I want this almost down to nothing. Okay. Let's see if that looks any better when I zoom out. So that's starting to look a lot better. And just keep playing with the layers and with erasing. And since I didn't name these very well, I'm having a hard time finding my layers here. Okay. But yeah, just keep adding layer masks and blending. That's the big key with hair. Okay. So as you can see, I have a layer mask on almost all of my hair layers now. I'm just kind of blending stuff back through. Okay. And if, you know, with using these layer masks, if you want to paint some of the hair back in that you lost, like maybe right here, I just have to find what layer that's on, and I can brush that back in. So I can just click down here and brush some of that back in if I want. Okay, so at this point that's looking pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and stop like I said I was going to, and show you where we started. Let me just group all this stuff so I can show you where we started. And this is where we're finishing this video at. I know it's not perfect, but just to keep this video to a somewhat okay length, I'm going to go ahead and stop here. I hope you learned something with this video, and if you did, and if you liked it, please subscribe. Please hit the thumbs up to support it. And please watch some of my other videos, and thanks for watching.